When you've got your content strategy roughly defined and stakeholders interested in implementing it, testing is a great way to refine it. Or maybe you're in a slightly different situation where you don't have those stakeholders on board. Testing is a great way to prove out your strategy with data to persuade them. And by testing into your strategy with small bits, you can see if it gets the results you need, or if you should maybe make some adjustments to the strategy before investing in it all the way. For example, before you go and start making a global edit to existing content across your product, or maybe adding a whole new content type to your mix that, maybe it's good to test it out on a small scale and see how it moves the needle, just up, down, or if at all. In this video, we'll talk about creating a small test plan to help steer your strategy to success. Let's start by acknowledging that there are many ways to test your content, and here are some of them. Each method will tell you something different, so you want to lead your testing with a question or a hypothesis. The approach and method will follow what you're trying to find out. The size or potential impact on the experience, along with your investment of internal resources, will also guide this choice. So really think about, what is your question? Are you trying to understand what message converts more buyers? Do you want to know if users remember your message an hour later or a day later or week? Do your users understand your content accurately? Could they read along and complete a task? Maybe what specific statements are believable to them, or what phrases inspire confidence? What categories do your users put content into? How do they want to find it? Or how can we hook up the system and deliver content in a new way? And you can see there's really no one method that's comprehensive, and ultimately you probably need to use more than one to get the kinds of feedback that you'll need to answer your questions, especially if it's a complicated one. There's plenty of information out there on testing that you can read on your own, but I would say after you get familiar, definitely go and spend some time talking with a researcher or an analyst. And if you don't have access to them, try a marketing manager or a product manager who oversees a lot of testing. And maybe make them your testing partner if you don't have one that's obvious or readily available. And if you don't even have that, just find whoever holds the keys to your testing instruments, or whoever is responsible for profit and loss. Sometimes you just have to look a little far and wide to find your partners. But let's get down to it. Probably the most common question you need to answer for your business is what content performs. So for that reason alone, I really want to just focus on A/B testing here, rather than try and cover the whole variety of testing methods out there that you could encounter. I know when I'm ready to think about implementing a content strategy, I'm usually asked to prove that it's worthwhile. In other words, does the cost of creating the content or making the change, does it pay for itself and a whole lot more by the lift that it will drive? A/B testing will give you that real-life result in your experience and a way for you to begin to calculate that out. And, business partners freaking love them. A/B testing is also called version testing. That's because you have two versions of your content where you isolate small variables and challenge them head to head. So, for example, you could be running two versions of a headline or two versions of a CTA and putting them against each other in the test. The current version, or the A version, your best version that you have in place now, that's called your control. And the other one, the new one, your B version, that's typically called the challenger. And you put it up against the control for a better result, hopefully. Although sometimes I've worked with folks, well, more than a few folks, who want to throw two entirely different versions of a whole entire screen up against each other in a test. And yeah, the new one, it usually wins, but you can't say much more about it than that. So, I don't know. Are these A/B tests? Yeah, technically. Are they optimization tests? Not really, no. I think they're more like do no harm tests, where you have a new page and they just want to test it out before replacing it completely in production to make sure they're going to get a good result. But in terms of learning, you don't really get anything out of it. And sometimes you hear A/B tests called split tests because you break down the traffic that's coming in to view each content version. Testing takes time because of this to reach a statistical significance, especially if you don't have a lot of traffic to play with in the first place. You've got to send enough traffic to each version to be sure that the change you see in conversion is not by chance. To make sure that when you turn on your traffic to that winning version, full throttle, 100%, you're going to see that same increase. And it can take months for smaller pops to get there. And what if your challenger doesn't perform as well? Well, then you're probably even losing value while you're testing. And all this is to say that your partners will probably be very risk averse to a certain level of testing because they need to maintain a target level of performance overall for the business. So I like to think as long as I'm testing something that we learn from, the test will have value even if a particular test doesn't improve on conversion. For me, I want to learn the value of each element and build on that knowledge as we go from test to test to test. And a note of caution here, testing does not generate new concepts. It can only make an existing version better or worse. Nor does A/B testing tell you why one tests better and another one not. Sometimes it's needed intelligence, but sometimes not. And when it is, you try another method and combine your data to understand more fully what's going on. Planning an experiment. Let's talk about doing something small on one page. Here's a template that I've used to formulate my tests, and you could try it too if you want. It has the basic breakdown of puzzle pieces that go into formulating your plan. So obviously and foremost, the problem. What are you trying to understand or improve on? Your top metric that you will measure, where you're going to run the test, and what's the brief little encapsulation of your challenger. And then you want to pull in any data that you might have available, whether that's qualitative or quantitative. And then very explicitly at the bottom stating your hypothesis. And for content strategy, I really like even just thinking like this template. The testing provides a good way to break down your thinking into like small test units. And I'll admit to even using this page just as a thought experiment when I start to think of like what are the components I'm pulling together to articulate what I'm trying to understand. So even if you don't share this to anyone, I think there's even value in just trying to fill one out. And yeah, sometimes I think you probably could just intuit better versions of your content based on your expertise as a content person. And sometimes that can be harder to get partners on board with without the data to back it up, even if that version you have in mind would test better in the end. So, to offset the risk in your test, like, are we losing value that your partners will be obsessed with? You can use data inputs and pull that from other sources to develop your test versions. Not only does the data help you decide what is worth testing, it helps improve your test effectiveness, and it can also help sell the potential to your partners. So you could look at other places. You could pull like voice of customer, user testing verbatims, support calls, like drop-off percentages through a flow or funnel. You're really looking for data that points to a problem with the control or an opportunity with the control, and using that data to inform the development of your challenger. And so here I've just filled out these pieces as an example using the template where I'm stubbing in information here. The problem, there's friction in the payment path. The top metric will be clicks on the continue button. Testing on the desktop funnel. My proposed change. I'm pulling in a piece of qualitative data from user testing and a piece of quantitative data from our credit card refunds, and stating my hypothesis specifically at the bottom that 5% conversion to the slider page is going to be improved by making this change in the content. If you're testing something biggish, then it maybe has a lot of facets to it. Take what you can learn in one test and thread it into the next one. For example, I know sometimes I just wanted to test and learn something about different audiences or segments that were using our product. And then maybe I wanted to learn something more specifically about a specific touch point. And then from there, I felt I could refine on messages. Or another way, like maybe there's an order to testing that you need to follow that makes sense for building out a messaging architecture. Just be open. Don't rule out the idea that you might need to create several test plans. I've actually myself sometimes had 4 or 5 on a page just to test into one strategy. So think about whether you want to break it out even further and how you would coordinate these towards one larger purpose. And next up, when you have that template drafted, go share it with your team or your testing partner. You'll want to align and refine the plan together as you get their feedback. And these are all questions you could go through together, just like who are we targeting, anything in specific? Do we have enough traffic? What do we count as successful? Is there a certain threshold we have to reach? Is there, concurrent tests that are running that we might need to be aware of that could somehow impact our result? Just how much risk? There's a lot of little things that you can pick through together as a team. And while you're discussing your plan, it's a really good idea to make sure you check in on what you're going to do with the results. I recommend setting an agreement before you run any. Like, hey, should testing be a decision like we usually have where each member has a say about moving a variant towards 100% where we each bring our perspective to the table. And why do this? Really to prevent testing to the bottom. The winning version may not be the best version. And by that I mean Say the winner is just this blinking free, free, free in all caps. Of course, I'm exaggerating here for illustrative purposes, but I think you know what I mean. We've all had those requests. And yes, it could drive more dollars, but it also at the same time erodes your brand or your content quality and maybe even trust. So, granted, if you're doing one test, that's probably not going to be a huge concern, but if this is going to be your entree into more frequent testing, it's definitely a consideration to address. At one time, I had a job where it was a mandate to complete 120 tests a year. And believe me, we squeezed every dollar out of every page. And while we did a great job collecting results, learning, sharing them in a library, presenting findings out to everyone, at the end of the year, it just started to feel like it was testing for the sake of testing. We're just trying to hit that 120. And the content just kind of went bananas. And it wasn't stuff that anybody would want even to win. And this is an extreme, but at least I think there's a lesson in there somehow that is the same no matter where you work. Feel out the situation with your partners. Like, are they just focused on one measure of success? How do they understand the limits of version testing? Will you be more than just, heard out? Express your concerns up front and see how they react before you just dive in fully. And all that said, have fun with your tests. Enjoy the satisfaction of seeing the impact you can make with just small, isolated, relatively inexpensive changes. And while you learn a ton doing testing, you'll probably find some surprises too. So go test. You can prove out the value of content and also improve your content strategy.